Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What would you do with a brain if you had one?
Do? Why, if I had a brain, I could...
Miles per hour.
I could while away...
46, 56 degrees.
I was interviewed by a news station a few weeks ago about this whole idea of privacy because people have become more interested in it. This interview was sparked by an executive order that was signed by Trump that allowed your internet service provider to sell your browsing history. Now, the interesting thing about that executive order is that it really didn't change anything. The order was to reverse a ruling by the Obama administration right at the end of the administration that hadn't been enacted yet. So nothing changed. But the media picked up on it, people hyped up about it, and it got amped up to be this big invasion of privacy. And one of the things that, I think one of the reasons the order was reversed was that it created an uneven playing field because it didn't touch Amazon and Google and Apple and all of the other companies that have access to the same data and are doing the same things with it. There's been 2 times when I've seen in my career that people have gotten really interested in virtual private networks. A VPN is basically encrypted communication. So it's a way that you can communicate privately using electronic devices. The 2 times that I've seen the biggest jump in interest in encrypted applications or encrypted communications were once in 2008 when this guy was elected, and again in 2016 when this guy was elected. And it's kind of interesting because, as you might expect, if this room were the country, half of the room got interested when this guy got elected, and the other half of the room got interested when this guy got elected. Suddenly we became appreciative of privacy, appreciative of the ability to communicate without necessarily people listening to what we're saying. How many of you recognize these 2 guys? So what do you think of them? Tell me what your opinions are, because there's some pretty passionate opinions on both sides. What do you think? This is meant to be a conversation, not a lecture.
But we're being recorded.
You're always being recorded.
Honestly, I think they're brave.
Very brave, aren't they? Yeah, when you think about a conversation, they have sparked a conversation. I know people who I really believe would probably shoot either one of them on sight without giving it a second thought. I personally probably appreciate the conversation they started to some degree. But there's no doubt that the people that they put in harm's way in order to start that conversation, including themselves and their families, there was a lot put on the line by both of them. That conversation that guy started was in 2013 when he leaked a bunch of information from the NSA. If you've been paying attention recently, there have been actually more documents leaked about CIA programs in the last month than during the entire time that he's been leaking information. If you Google the term Vault 7, you'll see where WikiLeaks has been posting an enormous dump of information from the CIA detailing a lot of programs that they have had going for a long time. What was the lesson from this? Does anybody remember approximately when this book was written? Yeah.
1948.
Yeah, 1949, I think, somewhere in there. So very, very long time ago. What was the lesson from that book? How many of you have read this book? I should ask that first. Most of you. A lot of us did it in high school, probably. What was the lesson? Because I think sometimes the lesson's missed, or maybe it's not fully grasped, fully appreciated.
Language can be reformed.
Okay, language can be reformed.
You know, because the ministry of love being the ministry of hate.
Yeah.
Language can be fluid depending on the conversation being had.
And not only that, behavior can be changed by being watched. You know, my t-shirt says, dance like no one is watching, encrypt like everyone is. The reason that's funny is because if you dance like no one's watching, you're going to dance in a way that's different than if you think somebody's watching. There have been dozens and dozens and dozens of psychological studies that show conclusively, without a shadow of a doubt, you act differently if you think you're being watched. You don't even have to really actually be being watched, but if you think you're being watched, your range of behavioral options shrink. You don't have the full range as you would if you thought you were in private. Let me tell you something that you may not fully appreciate. You are being watched all the time. The business model of the internet is surveillance. All that we have seen from Snowden and from Assange is that the agencies that our governments employ to learn secrets are taking advantage of the same thing that businesses have been taking advantage of since 1996. The business model of the internet is surveillance. When you download an app, if you don't pay anything for it, what do you think the product is? It's you. It's you. You're the product, right? If you download Angry Birds and you get addicted to playing that fun little game that you didn't pay a dime for, somebody's making money. They're making money with your location data because when you downloaded it, you gave them permission to save your location, record it, and sell it. And that's exactly what they do with it. That's exactly what most of the apps you download. Think about, especially on an Android, when you download an app, you download your flashlight app and it says, I need access to your camera and your microphone, and your contacts, and your location. What do you say? Most of us say, yeah, I need a flashlight, no problem. Does that flashlight really need access to all of that? Right? I can put malware on an Android device right now. In fact, if I gave you a URL, you could go and download it. And I can then turn on your mic, I can turn on your camera, I can get your lat long, I can get your contacts off of your phone. It's trivially simple to do because Android doesn't require a developer to sign their apps. Anybody can upload an app to the Google Play Store, or you can just host it on your own website and say, here's my new and improved video streaming app. If you need access to all the latest movies, all the latest whatever, click here and download. And maybe it comes along with some goodies that you didn't anticipate. So this website, I've got a plugin called Ghostery here that is popping up a box on Reuters.com and on WebMD. I just did this yesterday. And what this box is showing is all of the companies that these companies have entered into agreements with saying we'll share our data. So you can think of these purple boxes as kind of being everybody that's looking over your shoulder every time you browse that website. And they're looking at every link you click on, every search you perform, everything you do on that website. Now, I've blown up the box to show a few companies that show up every time on almost every site that I visit. Google and Facebook. And the reason I blow those up is to kind of highlight the hypocrisy of a couple of the principles involved. This quote from Eric Schmidt, nothing to hide. If you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. But if you really need that kind of privacy, we're all subject in the United States to the Patriot Act. It's possible that information can be made available to authorities. True anonymity is too dangerous. Now, the interesting thing about Eric Schmidt is he told all of his employees, you can't talk to anybody from CNET because CNET published a very detailed article with his private information using Google tools. But he said, no, you can't talk to them. You know, this sentiment is something that we see a lot, and I've been guilty of this. Well, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about. Why all this concern about privacy? What's the problem with that? What do you think?
I mean, you could turn almost anything into something, bad with the right lens.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you that presupposes good guys and bad guys. And guess what? There are good guys and there are bad guys. But who decides that? My definition of a bad guy might be somebody that sits at home and does a search on how to build an explosive vest and plan a terrorist attack and blow things up. That's my definition of a bad guy. Well, the keeper of a political power, their definition of a bad guy might be anybody that speaks of dissent against their political system. Now, that might be okay if your guy's the right guy in office, right? Or your girl's the right girl in office, but what happens when that's no longer the case? It's a problem. Mark Zuckerberg said in 2010 that privacy is no longer a social norm. Do you believe that? You know who doesn't believe that? Mark Zuckerberg. His camera's covered, his mic's covered. When he and his wife built a house a few years ago, they bought not only the property to build their house on, they bought all the properties in the area so they could have this big zone of privacy. Privacy must be a social norm they still hold on to. What if I told you that you're being watched right now? Because you are. Did anybody look at your wireless devices while you were watching the movie tonight? If you look at the wireless networks before I arrived, all you would have seen were locked networks, mostly apartments upstairs and those around other places. If you look at it now, you're going to see some networks like, well, what are some that might be personal to somebody? carltellstales@gmail.com. That's a Wi-Fi network. ATT Wi-Fi, Big Mama's, Boingo Hotspot, Colton's Guest, Corwin Dodge Guest, Employee, Eurasia Cafe Wi-Fi, Fox Frankfurt Airport, GoGo In-Flight, Hero Coffee, HH Honors, Katie's. Oh, here's a nice one. Yell penis for password. I don't know whose network that is exactly. Yeah, so what's happening is your devices are always trying to connect to every network that you've ever connected to. And so what this little device is doing is it's listening for that. And so when your device beacons out and tries to connect to that network, there's one radio in this device that's turned on that's listening, and it reflects back and says, yep, that's me. I'm Corwin Dodge Guest, or I'm HH Honors, or I'm your vulgar named Wi-Fi hotspot, whatever it is. Now, what I didn't do is I didn't turn on the other radio. The second radio of this device, I could connect to my hotspot and route your traffic right onto the internet. And what will happen is your device will automatically grab onto ATT Wi-Fi, or it'll automatically grab onto Corwin Dodge Guest, or any of those unencrypted networks, and your traffic would go on straight to the internet. Now, what's the problem with that? Does anybody see a problem with that? I hope you do. What is it? It's going through here. It's passing through me. I've got access to all of it. I can record it, I can sniff it, I can do whatever I want to with it. Now, the only way that I can't is if you're encrypting like everyone's watching, which I hope you are. If you have a VPN client on your phone, on your tablet, on your laptop, then as your data passes through here, it passes through encrypted, and I can't see it. So if there's any takeaway from the talk tonight, it's to do a little bit of research, do a little bit of homework, and figure out about encryption. It's something you want to learn about. Privacy matters. Don't give up on that. Don't think that that's a quaint concept for our forefathers. If John Quincy Adams, if Benjamin Franklin, if the framers, if the founders of this country didn't have privacy, we wouldn't be here. Now, I pray that there's never a day whenever it would come to something like that. But in every country, everywhere around the world, privacy is something that matters. My son right now is studying in a country that doesn't share the same values that we do about information. And so before he left, I loaded him up with some encryption apps and some secure ways that he and I can communicate so that we could talk about things. And his opinion was, Dad, that's so stupid. That's ridiculous. You know, this country gives us an app that they approve of. We'll just use that. Okay, no problem. So I created, I got a separate device. I put that app on that device, and we've used that to communicate. Well, a few weeks ago, things started getting kind of interesting over in that part of the world. And I started getting messages on my encrypted app from him. He wanted to talk. What did I think? What's going on? What's happening? Suddenly, privacy mattered, right? Privacy is something we can't take for granted. It's something we have to hold on to. This conversation that Snowden and Assange have started, we've got to advance. We've got to move on. There's a quote that says something to the effect, and I thought I put it on here, but I must have deleted it. If you can make yourself so boring that nobody cares, then privacy doesn't matter, right? The last slide that's on here, if I can get back to it, is from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And I want you to Google that and read about them. The EFF, if you go to ssd.eff.org, the Electronic Frontier Foundation will give you some tutorials and allow you to start learning about encryption and protected and private communication. It's worth taking the time to do that. It may seem like that's too complicated or seem like something you don't have the time to mess with. It's really not. You can do this stuff. If we can figure out how to get our phones on the network, we can figure out how to keep them safe and how to be secure. Any comments or questions or any follow-up on any of this? Yeah.
I know the last time I had a VPN, it really slowed down the whole system.
Mm-hmm.
Has that improved over the last couple of years?
It depends a lot on your provider. And actually, the EFF has a page where they list something like 150 different VPN providers. And they compare them on a number of different dimensions, and you can decide which ones are most important to you. It might be price, it might be logging, it might be country of jurisdiction, whatever is important to you, you can compare all of them. Could be speed. The number of data centers matter. You know, if you've got a VPN provider that's giving away their stuff for free, they're probably going to be slow. If they're charging $5 a month, $10 a month, probably worth it because you're going to get that performance. Plus, you might get some other criteria that are important to you. I never just go out and recommend, say, go use this one, because they're all going to have their issues. It just depends on what's important to you. So that's a good question. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you for coming. That's it.